They're also trying to put an ICE detention center on native land in Washington state. The Native Americans are telling them no. It appears ICE is trying to sneak it onto the res anyway. Thank you, Paul, for bringing this up. This has been on my list of stories to cover, and I just hadn't gotten around to it yet. So earlier in November, I think it was November 12th or 14th, the Seattle Times reported, and shortly thereafter, King 5 News reported that ICE had reached out to the Nisqually Indian tribe asking if they could put, I think it was a 288-bed detention center on tribal land. For folks who aren't from the Pacific Northwest, you may not be aware that there is a large ICE detention center in Tacoma, the Northwest ICE Processing Center. It has about a little less than 1,600 beds. Like many ICE concentration camps, NWDC is run by a for-profit corporation named GEO Group. They are publicly traded, although the majority of their income comes from lucrative government contracts, so I haven't seen any effective economic boycott that's been organized against GEO Group, and also Core Civic, which is another for-profit corporation that runs these kind of facilities for ICE. So apparently, 1,575 beds is not enough, and ICE wanted to expand in Washington state. So earlier in November, they reached out to the Nisqually Indian tribe and were like, "Hey, we want to put a concentration camp on res land. We want to be able to put 288 immigrants here." When this story broke, I was like, oh, there's a little insight into the mind of these chucklefuck chuddies who work for ICE, that they thought they were going to get a native tribe to assist the United States government in their efforts to commit an ethnic cleansing against immigrants in this country. Some white dude working for ICE thought that he would go to native people and say, hey, y'all want to help us commit an ethnic cleansing? And they thought that that was a good strategy. They thought that that was going to work out well for them. But, maybe they didn't, because what we learned from this reporting is that it's actually the Seattle Times that informed the Nisqually Tribal Council that ICE was maneuvering to try and get a contract for this 288-bed facility on tribal land. The tremendous amount of disrespect that ICE showed by not going to the tribal council, and instead it's the Seattle Times that received information that talks were ongoing regarding the detention space, but those talks did not include the tribal council. Tribal Chair Choke issued a statement saying the Nisqually people are not in favor of, nor will the tribal council allow, the detention of individuals by ICE on our reservation or in our facilities. Of course, neither ICE nor DHS responded to the Seattle Times request for a comment. A little less than a week later, we got an update to this story in the Spokesman Review, and I think these additional details are really important. In an updated statement, the Nisqually Tribal Council, quote, reaffirmed the tribe's commitment to treat all people with dignity and respect by confirming that it will not house detainees for ICE. Because Donald Trump, Kristi Noem, Stephen Miller have dramatically escalated the ethnic cleansing of brown people in this country, facilities all over the place are nearing capacity, including the NWDC location in Tacoma. So it is not surprising that they are scrambling to find more beds, especially because it's these private corporations like Team Housing Solutions and Core Civic and GEO Group. They get paid per head, something like $120,000 to $160,000 taxpayer dollars per year to keep an immigrant detained. There is a financial incentive for them not only to abduct immigrants, but to keep them in detention facilities as long as possible. This is big business. This is ethnic cleansing in the United States is big business. Because of Oregon's strong sanctuary laws, there are no long-term detention facilities in our state. And that means immigrants abducted here get sent up to Washington. And we know that ICE is trying to put something in Newport, Oregon on the coast, and that the residents of Lincoln County are vigorously pushing back. They're not going to allow ICE to come in there. So these for-profit contractors who run these facilities are scrambling to try and find new real estate that they can use in order to advance their ethnic cleansing and increase their profit margin. And they're not having success in Oregon, so of course they're also trying in other locations in Washington state, not just with tribes, but also with various municipalities. And I'm going to read a little bit here from the Spokesman Review's article, because I think it helps explain a little bit more the kind of insidiousness of what ICE is doing. On Monday, Tacoma spokesperson Maria Lee said the city has not received a proposal from ICE to house federal detainees and has no contractual relationship with ICE. Back in February, the city council passed a resolution affirming their support for immigrants and pledged to use no city funds to investigate, enforce, cooperate, or assist in the investigation and enforcement of any federal registration or surveillance programs that targeted people based on race, religion, citizenship, status, national origin, sex, or gender. Furthermore, the city of Tacoma does not own or operate a jail or detention facility and currently contracts for jail services with Pierce County and the Nisqually tribe. State law, specifically the Keep Washington Working Act, also prohibits local government entities from entering into immigration detention agreements. The city of Tacoma remains focused on serving the needs of the Tacoma community. The Fife Police Department would not engage in immigration enforcement because it's against state law. Thus, we would not house detainees. The city also does not have any active jail or correctional facility. See, the reason that ICE is having to reach out to tribal governments is because Washington state law prohibits local governments from entering into immigration detention agreements. So see how they're trying to get around that by trying to put these detention facilities on tribal land, right? So because tribes are sovereign nations, they are not bound by this Keep Washington Working Act. But it's even worse than that. There's another layer to this. According to Indigenous rights attorney Gabe Galanda, it is any tribe's prerogative to consider collaborating with ICE, but entering into such agreements carries significant legal and civil rights implications. A person held in a tribal detention facility while awaiting immigration proceedings may not have the same protections that would apply to them in a non-tribal facility. Galanda went on to explain that if ICE is seeking detention contracts with tribes, the agency is attempting to bypass standard protocol. I think my three big takeaways from this story are: one, that Indigenous people are holding strong, standing in solidarity with immigrants. Two, that sanctuary laws make it significantly harder for ICE to commit their ethnic cleansing. The reason that these contractors for ICE are trying to do business with tribes is specifically because sanctuary laws make it impossible for them to do this kind of business with local governments. And my third takeaway here is that everything the regime is doing, yeah, absolutely, it's about advancing their fascist agenda. Yeah, it's about advancing their ethnic cleansing, white Christian nationalism, et cetera, but it's also about the grift. It's also about corruption. It's also about money. It's all about money. So part of the way that we fight back, one of the most effective ways that we can fight back, is to make what they are doing as unprofitable as possible, to make it as difficult for them to get our taxpayer dollars to do the terrible things that they're doing. Congress has given just a tremendous billions and billions and billions of our taxpayer dollars to ICE that they are then trying to give to these contractors, or contractors are trying to get a chunk of that money. And we've got to make sure that we deprive them of any and every opportunity to take our taxpayer dollars to commit an ethnic cleansing. Always, with everything this regime does, with everything collaborators do, we hit them in the pocketbook. Congress has allotted billions and billions of our taxpayer dollars to ICE. And that means there are all kinds of greedy businesses, greedy men who have no problem enriching themselves by having government contracts to do the bidding of ICE, of Stephen Miller, of Christine Nome. And it's our job to make it as hard as possible for them to get those government contracts, make it as hard as possible for them to get their bounties on immigrants, to make it as hard as possible for them to be profitable in their horrible, cruel, inhumane endeavors. That looks like the city of Newport fighting to get their Coast Guard helicopter returned. That looks like Nisqually tribal government refusing to do business with ICE and to let them have a contract for their correctional facility. That looks like hotels up and down the Oregon coast refusing to take contracts with ICE's contractor Team Housing Solutions to house ICE chuddies for up to a year. It looks like all of us, local governments, tribal governments, individual businesses, refusing to take this blood money. So thank you to the Nisqually people for holding strong. I'm sure that those are lucrative contracts that y'all are turning down. And thank you for being such a good example of what it looks like to be non-cooperative with fascism. Thank you for showing us how it is that we resist by refusing to take their contracts, refusing to take their blood money, refusing to do their bidding. We make it as hard as possible for them to do their jobs. We make it as unprofitable as possible for all of these businesses that are willing to contract with ICE.